Morning, everyone. Welcome. My name is Menachem Creditor. It's my honor to serve as scholar in residence and rabbi for UJA Federation of New York. We bring you Torah and music, blessing, and community every weekday. We've been doing so since March 18th, 2020. Today it is Thursday, September 4th, 2025. That's 5.5 years of Torah every single weekday morning. With friends like Bensi, it's good to see you. And Jody, Robert, nice to see you too. Lydia, hope that you are safe and well. Susie and Cynthia, sending you love. John, hi friend, nice to see you. Let's see who's here on Facebook as we get started here on this platform too. It is broadcast 1381. It is day 699 since October 7th. Linda and Rosa, good to see you. Dale and Sharon, Jack, Jonathan, Boker Tov, friends, it's good to see you too. Amy and Debbie, let's see who else is here. Jonathan and Barry, Boker Tov, Sharon and Natalie, hi. Roberta, sending you love all the way to Florida. Let's see if there's anybody else to join in and say good morning with. Ashley and Carl, Patricia and Cecile, good morning. All right, hi Kate. Let's take a breath, sing a bracha, learn some Torah. Stanley and Adrian, Amy and Sherry. Hi, Ashley. Okay. Ya lai 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 lai, diddy I lai lai lai, diddy I lai 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 lai, I la lai lai, Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah la'asok b'divrei Torah hafoch ba v'hafoch ba la'asok b'divrei Torah. Diddy I lie 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 lie, diddy I lie lie lie, diddy I lie 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 lie, I la lie lie. So good morning, everyone. It is broadcast 1382. Thank you, Penny. And it is day 699 since October 7th. Let's wish healing for Liron ben Sarah. Thank you, Rosa, for keeping him in our hearts. And let's make sure that on this impossible 699th day since October 7th, we make sure to keep our beloved 48 in our hearts, in our prayers, in our deeds, especially given that there's a report that the Times of Israel has placed at the top of their homepage, telling us that there is a proposal right now to end the war and bring them all home right now. There's no reason for them to still be there. There was no reason for them to be there in the first place. We have been counting the days since our beloveds were taken, stolen from their homes. This last week, one young girl whose name should be protected so that she can be a human being and not a headline, she was held for 50 days as a hostage. A little girl who only began kindergarten this week was stolen from her home 699 days ago, and 48 beloveds are still being held, some deserving of proper burial, and some who desperately need the healing to begin right now, whose families need them, whose people needs them, whose community needs them, and the world should continue, maybe should start, paying appropriate attention. Let's make sure, friends, let's make sure that we don't change our goal, which is for all of them to be home. This amulet is rusty enough. It's time. It's been time. I want to look at the Parsha straight on. There is a sequence of events at the very beginning of Parshat Teitzei that can be understood as individual cases. After all, there are 74 laws in this week's Torah portion. 74 mitzvot out of the 613 are found in Parshat Ki Teitzei. What a fascinating thing to see a Torah portion so burdened by all these, or blessed, by all these commandments concentrated in one place. How powerful for us to consider what Moshe must have felt like in this final speech, which lasts weeks, where he is commanding us one thing after another, and it begins with a very hard line. Ki Teitzei lamilchama, when you go out to war. Well, let me tell you a sequence of things, all of which should feel troubling as I recite them, but you should look there at the beginning of Parshat Ki Teitzei. They're all there in this order. When you go out to war, and the presumption is that you, our ancestors, the Israelites, would win. When you go to war, and trigger warning, none of this is pleasant, and you take the population that you have conquered captive. So hard to read. And remember, the ancient warriors are all men, and in the ancient world, war ended with complete destruction. That was the goal in the ancient world. It cannot be the goal in our modern world. And you see a woman who is beautiful. So clearly, in the ancient world, these verses are speaking to a male warrior who is full of battlefield energy. I don't know how else to describe it. My sister is a chaplain. Lieutenant Commander Rabbi Yonina Creditor is a chaplain in the Navy, and she tells me how important it is to help sailors and officers and in other fields of the military, soldiers, to retain a sense of humanity while fighting. What an impossible thing to be trained for war but trying to stay human. Well, our ancient ancestors have that incredible mandate to retain humanity while wielding force. We, in this moment, are absolutely mandated in the same way to retain our humanity even when force is necessary. And you can see the different gradations of this all over the world, including in the United States. So, again, problematic, absolutely. Ancient in outlook, absolutely. Perhaps something to learn from it today. I'm going to keep going through the text. When you go to war and you take the population captive, you conquer. And you see, meaning a male warrior sees a female warrior who is beautiful. And he wants to, I'm saying it in modern terms as if any of this feels right, take her as a wife. And you might imagine this warrior energy, what we would probably in today's culture call toxic masculinity, but on a battlefield, so all the more so. The Torah says you can't do that, and that can't is very important. There's a limitation. Just because you've won a war doesn't give you the right to treat anyone as not human. And so what the Torah says is not simple, but see it as a mediating impulse, a limitation on a warrior. It says, you must take her into your home. She must trim her hair and trim her nails, some things that in the Torah's view makes someone beautiful. You can have no hair and be beautiful, and no fingernails, or long hair and different kinds of fingernails, and there is all sorts of beauty in every form of humanity. But in the Torah's notion, these things make that woman less, on the surface, attractive to that warrior man that the Torah is talking to. And more than that, the woman has to be able to mourn, to express grief. And so for a month, the warrior has to take care of this woman who has suffered terribly and treat her with humanity and give her the chance to grieve for a full month. And then, if he still wants to marry her, then he can marry her. Again, what a weird thing to talk about in our modern world. What a strange choice for an intentionally inspiring Torah message this morning to share. But that is the way that the Parsha begins. That's Ki Teitzei, how it begins. And then a second case, which is no less complicated. Hear it, by the way, I'm telling you in advance, hear it as a critique of the stories of Genesis, of Breshit. If a man has two wives, well, think about Yaakov, Jacob in particular. And the Torah says in Parshat Ki Teitzei this week, if a man has two wives, one is ahuva, one is loved, one is snu'ah, one is hated. And this is just so awful. But listen to what the Torah says as a critique of its own history. The man may not give the firstborn son of the loved wife more than the actual firstborn who might be born to the wife who is not loved. Every translation, by the way, here says unloved, because it's so much nicer than what the Torah actually says. The Torah says snu'ah, hated. The translators can't imagine, nor should we be able to imagine, such a terrible degradation of relationship. But it presents right after the battlefield this image. And the message, if it wasn't clear, let me say it slightly differently, is that the firstborn child might be born to the wife who is not loved. What a terrible, terrible thing to imagine. And the man can't give to the firstborn of the loved wife what his actual firstborn deserves. And this is a challenging thing for us to hear in countless ways, but if you hear it as a critique of Genesis, then the firstborn of Leah, who Yaakov did not choose to marry, remember the stories, was the firstborn, and Jacob should not have shown preference to the firstborn of his beloved wife, who was Joseph. So complicated. I know I'm speaking in all of these very complicated ways. Let me look at the third section. Look with me, which is one of the hardest moments of the Torah. You might know the phrase ben sorer umoreh, a rebellious child. The Torah says, if a rebellious child who does not listen to the voices of his mother and his father, by the way, the Torah says the voice of his mother and his father, is so rebellious, they should bring him before the elders of the town and say, this one does not listen to us, he is a rebellious child, and the town commits, the town sentences the child to death, and the whole town stones him to death. Again, here I am, sharing these three very ragged, terrible sections of this week's Parsha. Why am I doing this? First of all, it's in there, and we learn it, and we have to confront the parts of tradition that are hard. And boy, is this a difficult Parsha in that way, especially in its opening. But there's one more section. At the very end of the opening chapter of this Parsha says, if a person is sentenced to death for a crime that they have committed, you cannot leave their body hanging. And in the ancient world, that used to be done theoretically as a deterrent, as a show of, don't do this. But there is a medieval Spanish commentator, you might have heard the name Sforno, who says actually all of these very hard stories are not independent of each other. They are one after the other, and they are causational. The stories connect one to the next, a technique that traditional commentators called smichut parshiot, the connection of one story to the next, one section of the Torah to another. And now hear what I've shared, and none of it's gentle, and it doesn't get better, but the direction of this, the trajectory of these stories is important. If you go to war and you treat someone, and in this case, treat a woman objectively, you objectify them, and you do go through this process, and you do marry that person in a world of polygamy, then you will end up having a wife who is loved and a wife who is not. Because how could you possibly imagine this going well for you or for your, in that world, wives, for your family? And if you do have that situation where you show favoritism or love in an imbalanced way, you will end up modeling a terrible kind of self-image, let alone notion of love. And you will end up having a ben sorer moreh. Your child will see terrible things and will end up being not just rebellious, but out of control, because that's what your life has been. War began this. You treated people inhumanely. You brought that into your own life, modeled it in your family. What else will a child learn? And if, God forbid, this sequence takes place, then there will be death sentences modeled all around. The big message from the opening of Teitzei is something terrible but urgently important for us to learn, which is actions have consequences. And war is ugly. And the dehumanization of another leads to death. That is something that we certainly have learned, but have we really learned it? We are facing countless conflicts in the world. And as Jewish people, we are facing dehumanization everywhere, but we cannot channel that and do that. War is ugly. I'm remembering a lesson from Rav Lichtenstein, who was a founder of the yeshiva called Hesder. There's a whole movement in Israel where ultra-Orthodox Israelis, religious Zionists, which is not the same as ultra-Orthodox, by the way, it's worthy of its own conversation, train for the military but also learn full-time. So instead of 2 years of service, it's 5 years. So it combines traditional learning with military service. And he has this comment from a Torah perspective on the use of weapons. He said, you could say that our enemies have forced us to become skillful with weapons. We don't love these weapons. It is a mitzvah to defend ourselves, but woe to us, I'm riffing on what he taught, woe to us if we begin cherishing force, weapons. If I were to sum up all the things that I've said, and it's not really possible to sum it up, it's that war is ugly and actions have consequences. And once we give in to the violent impulses, sometimes born of reactivity, sometimes born of twisted notions of love, people get hurt. And we model terrible things for our children. And it ends in death. And we should read the Torah as a warning here. Moshe is packing in dire lessons for us to learn before we go to war. And that's where the Torah is in this moment. We are 699 days into a necessary military response, but we are thick in the ugliness of war. And it has caused so much death. Again, we should speak with clarity about this. The moral responsibility for all of this destruction is Hamas. It falls on Hamas for having embedded itself intentionally within civilian populations that it was willing to sacrifice in the name of destroying Israel. That's what this is about under the surface, literally under the surface. A terror tunnel network under hospitals, mosques, homes, and schools is all about maximizing the death of civilians. But how ugly this whole thing is. How ugly it is. Enough death. It's enough death. Moshe warns us. This path only leads there. The dehumanization that comes from all sorts of things, especially twisted notions of love. is a trap. And we have to see it as such. We have to retain both our own humanity and our ability to see the humanity in the other. The Torah portion begins with a presumption that sometimes ki teitzei lamilchama, you need to go to war. But woe to us if that's who we think we really are. We are more than that. Every human being should be more than that. I bless us with these very hard lessons, to process them, to face them, to hear what my friend John teaches his students, that comfort is not a Jewish value. That's so hard to hear. It's true. And to do more than pray for the release of our beloveds. It's to recognize that there is a deal on the table right now. That Tzahal, the IDF, is saying it is time to take. May they be heard. May we amplify that call. Send your hearts to the east. On this 699th day since October 7th, pray with me. Call for their release. Call for their freedom like you have never called for it before. May they be freed before we have to count day 700. Kol hod balevav pnima nefesh Yehudi homia ulefatei mizrach kadima ayin letzion Sophia Od lo avda tikvatenu Hatikva bat shnot alpayim Liot am chofshi be'artzeinu Eretz Zion v'Yerushalayim Liot am chofshi be'artzeinu Eretz Zion v'Yerushalayim. Bring them home now. Am Yisrael Chai. See you tomorrow, my friends.